Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into Henry Kissinger's incredible book, Leadership. It's basically a masterclass on the strategies that literally built the world we live in today. And that really gets to one of the biggest questions out there, right? In his book, Kissinger gives us this amazing framework by looking at 6 specific leaders. And these weren't just everyday politicians. No, these are people who had to rebuild their countries from the absolute rubble of a world that had been completely torn apart. Okay, so let's get into it. How does Kissinger even define leadership? Well, he kicks things off with this core idea, this model. He says every single great leader finds themselves standing at a kind of crossroads. Think of it like this. On one hand, you've got the past, all the history, the culture, everything they've inherited. They have to balance that with what their gut tells them about the future, which is always uncertain. Then, on the other hand, they've got to take their own vision and make sure it connects with what their people truly believe in, their deepest values. It's this constant, super delicate dance between where you've been and where you're trying to go. Now, the leaders Kissinger looks at, they weren't just sitting in an office thinking up big ideas. No way. They were forged, literally forged in one of the most brutal, destructive periods in all of human history. Talk about a trial by fire. This was the ultimate test. Kissinger calls this whole period the Second 30 Years' War. And that's a really specific reference. He's pointing back to this huge war in the 1600s that just ripped Europe to shreds and totally redrew the map. His point is that in the same way, the decades from World War I to the end of World War II just completely turned the world upside down. Empires fell, old rules didn't apply anymore, everything was up for grabs. And the sheer human cost, I mean, look at this, it's just staggering. We're talking about nearly 10 million soldiers killed in World War I alone. Entire generations of young men were just gone. Any of that optimism people had at the start of the 20th century, completely wiped out. So this is the key thing to get, right? The leaders we're talking about didn't just step into a nice, stable situation. They literally came out of the ashes of a world that had fallen apart. And their job? This monumental, almost impossible task of building something brand new from scratch. So the big question is, how on earth did they do it? How do you navigate a catastrophe like that? Well, Kissinger points to 3 really distinct strategies, and we're going to break them down looking at a key leader for each one. First up, we have the strategy of humility. And our example here is Konrad Adenauer, the very first chancellor of West Germany. Just think about the situation he was in. His country wasn't just defeated and in ruins. It was morally condemned by the entire world and physically split in 2. And this is where you see Adenauer's genius. He just knew that Germany couldn't just show up and demand to be let back into the club. Nope, it had to earn its way back. His whole idea was that for a nation that was so defeated and ashamed, the only way forward was to first accept reality and start from a place of real, deep humility. And his success was incredible, as you can see here. The strategy worked perfectly. He dove headfirst into integrating with the West. He made sure Germany faced its moral debts by paying reparations. And step by step, he patiently built back trust. And the result? He took West Germany from being an outcast, a pariah, to a sovereign, respected nation. And he did it in just a handful of years. Truly amazing. Okay, now for a total 180. Next up is Charles de Gaulle of France. He represents a completely different path, the strategy of pure, unstoppable will. So, while Adenauer went with humility, de Gaulle chose pure audacity. He believed a leader isn't just some manager pushing papers. A leader is an artist, someone who has to literally sculpt the future. I mean, think about it. When France fell in 1940, he was this nobody general in exile, but he just refused to accept it. He basically created the idea of a free France out of thin air, just by the force of his own will. And he just kept doing it, from leading the resistance from another country to finally ending the horrific Algerian War. He always found a way to impose his vision on reality. But what's really fascinating, what's kind of the masterstroke, is when he reversed centuries of hatred and built a partnership with Adenauer's Germany. You had these 2 totally opposite strategies, humility and will, coming together to create the very foundation of the Europe we know today. All right, for our third and final path, we have the strategy of excellence. And there's no better example than Singapore's Lee Kuan Yew, who used a relentless drive for excellence just to make sure his country could even survive. Lee's situation was totally different.
He wasn't rebuilding an old country. He was building a brand new one from the ground up on a tiny little island with zero natural resources. His whole philosophy was, look, for us to survive, for this fragile new society to make it, the group has to come before the individual. And the way to do that was through discipline and an absolute non-negotiable commitment to meritocracy. The best people for the job, period.
And the results? I mean, they were just jaw-dropping. He took this vulnerable little port and turned it into one of the richest, most stable countries on the planet. And this is the really clever part. He proved that it doesn't matter how big you are or what resources you have. Pure excellence in strategy and governance, that alone, could make a tiny little state a global powerhouse. So, after looking at all these giants of history, Kissinger brings it all home with a really critical question. Why does any of this matter today? What's the big test for leaders in our world right now? And this right here really gets to the heart of Kissinger's biggest concern for our time. He lays out this really sharp contrast. You see, the leaders we've been talking about, they came from a world of deep literacy. They learned by reading history, by wrestling with complicated books all by themselves. But he worries that our modern world, this super fast-paced, visual, scroll and react culture, is the exact opposite. It pushes us toward instant reactions, instead of the kind of deep, quiet thinking that history shows is absolutely crucial for real strategy. Which brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, and maybe the most important quality of all. It's something Kissinger says is bigger than any strategy, any time period, or any piece of technology. And that quality is character. Above everything else, Kissinger argues that good character is the absolute bedrock of great leadership. It's the foundation that everything else is built on. Adenauer's humility, de Gaulle's will, Lee's excellence, all of it rested on character. Without that moral core, that sense of restraint and care for what happens next, any strategy is just empty. This quote here from Max Weber really nails the ultimate test. You know, real leadership isn't about winning when things are easy. It's about having the guts, the sheer fortitude to keep going when you fail, when you're let down, when the obstacles seem impossible. It's the strength to look at all of that and still say, nevertheless. It's the courage to just start over. And that's where Kissinger leaves us. He takes this incredible study of the past and turns it into a direct challenge for you and me today. In a world that's all about speed instead of depth, what kind of character are we going to need? Not just in our leaders, but in ourselves. What will it take to face the crises that are yet to come?